welcome to the Cigna Check-In, a series based on the findings of our ongoing Cigna COVID-19 Impact Study, an extension of Cigna's annual 360 Wellbeing Survey, which was launched at the start of the pandemic to research the impact of COVID-19 on people's well-being around the world. Here we will use the insights to deep dive into the triggers of stress, where they may come from, why stress may be heightened in these unprecedented times, and most importantly, to give you the tools and information you need to perform successful stress care check-ins on yourself and those you care for. I'm Patrick Rona, Head of Brand and Thought Leadership for Cigna International Markets, and today I'm joined by Dr. Peter Mills, Medical Director of Cigna Europe, and Paul Lewis, financial journalist and presenter of BBC Radio 4's Money Box. Thank you both for joining us. So dealing with finances is a topic that obviously affects us all. Talking about personal financial situations is very uncomfortable at the best of times. And of course, in this current climate, financial stress is more heightened than it may ever have been, which is why opening up on the subject is probably more important than ever. Paul, why is finance heightening stress in this current climate?
Well, there are many people, of course, who have lost their jobs. There are people whose pay has been reduced. There are people in small businesses whose business is struggling to survive, even failing to survive in some cases. And because this is a global problem and because it affects the whole country, certainly, it's uncertainty and fear about the future, because the things you take for granted, your job will be there as long as you turn up and you do the work. Those things can no longer be taken for granted. And the falling income, but continuing expenses is what is really worrying people and stressing them tremendously. For some people, I have to say, in good professional jobs, they probably at this moment do not feel that job is at threat, at risk. Then I suppose there are the great majority of people who find that they're either been laid off temporarily, perhaps on reduced pay. Then there is a third group, and again, a smaller group, where they have actually lost their job. Their job has disappeared. They've been laid off. They've been told, don't come back. And this is particularly applied to a lot of freelance people. Most people don't earn more than they need to live their normal lives. They earn what they need and they spend up to their income in many cases. And there are certainly people in my country, in the UK, and I'm sure there are around the world, who do not know if they can carry on feeding their families because their income is so low. Now that is stress.
People are finding themselves in different and somewhat difficult financial positions than what they may be used to. What tips can you offer people to assess where they might be in their financial picture from a financial health point of view?
I mean, the first thing is to recognize that it's happening. Don't just feel frightened. Look at what's happening. Look at your income and the prospects for your income. Look at your debts, your bills. Be honest with yourself. Look at it yourself. And of course, if you have a partner, if you live in a family, talk to the other people in the family and find out their position as well. So you know as a household where you are, because only if you face up to it can you try and deal with it. It might be a very frightening picture, but at least you know the facts. That is the most important thing to cope with financial stress.
What are the positive effects or outcomes that one might get from doing a stress care check-in around financial situation more regularly?
I think the first thing is realizing you're not alone. In this time of great stress, we might not see our friends as we normally do. We might see them on Zoom or FaceTime or something like that, or talk to them on the phone. And we think, oh, they sound okay, they're coping. They're probably not. But once you start talking to people about their financial circumstances and you're honest about your own, then you do realize you're not alone. And I think being not alone, not the only person suffering this, is very important. And of course, there are millions and millions of people. We have time to sit around and think and worry. That is not a good idea. Getting down to the practical nitty-gritty can reduce the stress enormously. And if you reduce the stress, you make more rational decisions. I think that's my message for people from that.
Can either of you or both of you offer advice on how to get into this conversation, entry techniques, if you will, to help people start talking a little bit about some of the financial stress they may be facing?
It is a difficult conversation. Sometimes it's a difficult conversation to have even with yourself or with your loved ones. It can be quite daunting talking about such personal things as stress. A good way to start the conversation is actually to talk about your own experiences of stress and anxiety or fear around the current situation. Being open and being honest can really kickstart the conversation and makes it less like an interview or an interrogation.
But if you've got a member of your family or a close friend or a partner, child, and you fear that they are getting themselves into financial difficulties, or you fear that they are really under stress, I think a good way is to actually talk about your stress, your concerns, and then they realize, first of all, they're not alone. But I think a way in for me would be to say, oh, I'm really worried about money, I've got all this and all that. And then they will think, well, yes, I'm like that too. And I think that might be an opening to get in and talk to people. And the most important thing is to get those facts down on a piece of paper, but talk about it, and not in a boastful way, in an honest way about our fears.
One of the interesting findings for me was around the differences in how men and women are feeling about financial stress. For instance, women went from 22% before COVID to 18% this past April in terms of how they felt and feeling good about having enough money to meet their family's medical needs, while men remained relatively flat at about 27%.
I was very struck on the figures that you found, that it was women who principally had suffered a decline in their confidence about their finances. And I think the difference between men and women, which I understand was statistically significant, is really because women on the whole, they have lower incomes, they earn less, they're in more precarious positions. And it's inevitable that a major crisis in their lives, personal or global, is going to make them less confident about their finances, because they are always overall in a more precarious position than men.
Dr. Mills, can you expand a little bit on some of the tools that Cigna can offer to people around the world, whether they be customers or not?
So there are some great resources that focus in on different aspects of our life, be that physical activity, be that sleep, but the science behind it is something called cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT for short. And there are many resources out there that teach you CBT, which is understanding, okay, how do your thoughts impact your emotions? And then in turn, how do your emotions impact your behaviors? Once you understand that, the different elements of your life, it is then possible to start to unpack that and start to do things differently, so you feel less stressed.
To both of you, really, is there anything else that you would like to add to this important conversation? Anything that I may have missed, or indeed a question that you feel should be addressed?
Yes, we've been talking about problems, we've been talking about the difficulties, about loss of income, about loss of jobs, about stress. I'm not saying things will get back to normal very quickly, but there will be a time when we get back to normal. And I'd like to think financially it will be a better normal. Now, it's hard to imagine that when you're struggling to feed your family or you're worried about your job being lost. But the techniques that you can use to look at your finances will stand you in good stead in good times as well as bad. So let's look forward, if we can, to a better normal, when we are more in charge of our finances, more aware of it, when we don't hide things from ourselves and our loved ones. And that could make our lives better when this dreadful problem is behind us.
Okay, that's all we have time for today. Thank you both for joining me. Whether it's job security or many little elements building up, financial stress is certainly heightened during this time, and making sure you perform regular stress care check-ins with yourself and the people around you is vitally important. For more information on how to perform impactful stress care check-ins, receive free advice around stress, and get the most up-to-date Cigna insight and data, please visit our dedicated hub. I look forward to welcoming you back to our next episode coming soon.